Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Today, I am so excited to have Candy Mercer here to join us for a chat. Now, some of you may have heard of Candy, some of you may not have heard of Candy, but where I heard of her, and I'll actually just bring her article up on the screen here real quick, is Candy wrote this article, Why I Voted Trump, a coming out story. And I have to tell you guys, I have been sent this article by so many people over the last several days. And I just, I thought it's the week before the election. You guys know I'm really busy running around the country doing all these events and things, but I just had to have Candy on to tell her story now because I see so many similarities between Candy's journey and my journey, but Candy also has very different life experience than I do. So I definitely want to hear about how she came to this, what her journey was like, and see where we might be the same and see where we might be different. And then, of course, we'll take some questions from you guys if you have them. So, Candy, welcome to my channel.
Thank you, Carlin. I'm so happy to have a conversation with you. I will say in a mutual admiration society, but back to you. Your story over time has resonated so deeply with me and helped keep me sane by giving me a reality check. When you did your Trump video, Why I Voted Trump, and you publicly came out and you owned it without apology, that is what inspired me to finally have the spine and own my vote publicly and finally tell my story. I have shared bits of it, but I've never put it into a form. I have tried several times and not been able to get it, but it had to be done. If I was going to tell why I voted Trump, I had to lay out my case.
Mm-hmm. And you're so brave to do that. And I really want to commend you for it because when I put my story out there, even of just going to the Trump rally, I had absolutely no idea what was going to come of it. I really didn't. It took me completely by surprise, but I think you went into it with your eyes more wide open, maybe because you'd seen my story or you'd seen this happen to other people. Like I really hadn't. I came from a place of complete ignorance. And so I want to commend you on your bravery in terms of putting it out there.
Well, thank you. I have learned to walk into the fire with my head held high. I knew I had a similar experience. I was somewhat naive. I started going to conservative events. I went to the biggest Republican fundraiser in Thurston County, the Lincoln Day Dinner. This is the belly of the beast. If there's going to be hate, if there's going to be bigotry, it's going to be here. And I went there, and I went as a reporter and a guest. I was going to be a good guest, my manners. But I was, had my little notebook for under the table to write down the notes of the quotes of the hate I heard. So I, could remember them. And I was blown away at how absolutely wrong I was. Just absolutely wrong. Brandon was the keynote speaker. He got a standing ovation from a room of conservatives.
I know.
They were cheering him. People were crying. He's a gay man, my God. But to be fair, conservatives used to be very anti-homosexual, and that is what I grew up on. So the thing is, they're not anymore. I did not see, I'm the one who actually made the most inappropriate comment all night. I was in an elevator, and we were worried about the weight of the aggregate of people in the elevator. And so I did a little calculation, and then I made a joke, but that's using white math. And it hit like a lead balloon.
I bet it did.
Nobody even chuckled. And, so I was really embarrassed at that moment. I was like, wow, okay. So that was really, you're the first person I told that story to, actually, because I've been really embarrassed by it. It didn't hit in that crowd, but it was the Big Tent. Everyone was there. No one shamed me. I was open about, hey, I'm a progressive. I worked on these projects. Nobody, everyone just wanted to hear more. I also met a patriot group in February, I think. Some guys from Reno came up from the homeless. They're doing a homeless project there. They came up to see our situation and tutor us. And so I had a one-on-one with a patriot, ask me anything. And I mean, unless they're totally lying to me, I spent a weekend with these guys. I don't think they're going to be acting this way just to trick Candy. They were genuinely like, and that was a breakthrough just in understanding. You know, they talk about the right wing militias, and yeah, there's some scary ones who are out there training and want to overthrow the government, like the guys that took over the Oregon compound. Mm-hmm. But the other groups, there's just such a closed-mindedness. So anyway, getting back on track a little bit more. So I went to the dinner. I had this great time. As a reporter, so I reported honestly on Facebook. Hey, I went to this. I saw Brandon. I put his video up. This is what I saw, and the hate began. One, for just associating with them, which I think, to me, one of my goals after the election was to walk the talk. It was to reach out across the aisle and break this polarization because it's destroying us. So I set out to understand conservatives and why they did this, and what could I do to be the change. So in walking the talk and merely associating with conservatives, and then daring to say something nice about them that went against the complete rigid stereotype of the left. And, you know, as the summer progressed and I was reporting more and more, it just became so stark. I was seeing one party that was tolerant and accepting, and I was seeing my friends and my allies just spewing hate, the abuse, the emotional manipulation, the shaming. I lost 90% of my social circle in Olympia. I've been canceled by the activist community, the comedy community, and the gaming community, most of them. There's still some people in each community who have stood by me. I am on the Antifa hit list to be creatively silenced. They put up an article on the Puget Sound Anarchist website, something strategies and tactics in Olympia, fighting smarter and harder. And they stick to the law. They're very careful in how they word it. But they say Olympia is a small town. There's only a few voices speaking against us. So if we can creatively silence even one of those voices, it'll make a big difference in Olympia. And they list a whole bunch of sites and places that they're going to watch and monitor and stalk to gather information and intelligence on people. And I intersected with about 8 of them. I have also angered them because I will read their Antifa texts at city council meetings. I will show up at a city council meeting and read from their primary source material that shows their true hate, their glee, their sadistic glee in keeping our downtown ugly and destroying it. And they don't like that at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, well, I mean, and that's so similar to what happened to me as well. And I think that, you know, when this originally happened to me, I didn't even say I was going to vote for Trump. I just basically said I wanted to understand why people were voting for Trump. And I started just watching, like, I watched Brandon was actually one of the first people I watched too. I watched a walkaway town hall in New York City. And even then I experienced the exact same backlash from my friends. I posted it on Facebook that I was daring to watch this conservative gay man talk about why he left the Democratic Party, and I got massive backlash from my friends just for having the gall to watch that video. So I completely understand. And that's, I mean, my God. So and I want to really emphasize this point for people watching. You live in Olympia, Washington. You live in like the belly of the beast, and you have been a progressive all your life, right?
Yep. I have an intimate association with Evergreen. I know all the characters. I know 25 years of Olympia activism history. I know how the pieces of the puzzle fit together, you know, how one event led to others. I know intimately how the psychology of activism and like, I worked with on Palestinian solidarity for almost a decade, which is one of the most contentious issues there are. We had our haters. We had certain groups. Part of the BDS movement did not originate in Olympia, but the Olympia Co-op was one of the first to actually boycott Israeli products. And the Israeli lobby, big money from out of state, came hard after these people, after my friends, lawfare. They sued them individually. It was horrendous. But we never had, you know, for all my years in activism, I have never had conservatives threaten me either to silence me or do bodily harm to me. Like this is unprecedented. And so I am sticking true to my values of nonviolence and tolerance and free speech. And the left seems to have no self-awareness that they have lost those things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how, and here's what my mistake was, and I think maybe yours too, is we went in trying to explain it. We felt like, okay, our friends know us. They might listen to us. Like, here I'm going and seeing this, and I want to share you what I'm seeing. And the mistake was this made us more of a threat. Like, because sometimes I feel like when it comes to politics and tribal and how people are putting their ideology and their tribalism above their relationships, sometimes I feel like I'm just a non-player character there to ratify your opinion of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if I broach that opinion of yourself as being this good savior person, it's astounding to me. And honestly, too, this is something that really surprises me, and this surprises me constantly, is, you know, I'm an atheist, okay? I am not threatened by anyone's religion. I have confidence in my position. Worship as you will. So it's strange to me that if you are very confident in what you believe in, why are people like us such threats? Why are we so dangerous? Why must we be silenced?
Exactly. And we're I think like some of the most dangerous people, because I think that people like you and me, and I look at, you know, Adam Krigler and, you know, Mikey Harlow and Brandon even too, quite frankly, and a lot of times we're very reasonable in our positions. We're not attacking people, we're not saying that you have to think like us. We're just saying here is what I think and here is why I think it, and that's almost the most threatening thing.
Yeah, and that's something that's almost my code of conduct. Is I'm going to share my experience authentically. I'm not going to tell you to think or feel this way, but I want to share this because I think it's important. And just, you know, Facebook is traumatizing at this point. I just took a 2-month break on Facebook because of the trauma, and I'm finding myself just not wanting to be there because of how ugly it got. In fact, yesterday I put up about being on your show. One of the things I'm doing with Facebook is I am transitioning my social life offline. I am going to be online for professional purposes only, for doing my work, you know, promoting my message. And I'm going to take my relationships offline for several reasons. One, a lot of people I love and respect are spewing hate, and I just don't want to see it because I'd like to try to love and respect them still. I'm also to protect my friends, as sad as this is, from blowback from associating with me, like that they might become targets because they're my friend. And it's crazy that we have to do that. So Facebook is just destroying the fabric of our society right now in terms of friendship and relationships. And I'm sure you've gotten it to all the stories of people estranged from family members. I have gotten so many, I'm honored and humbled. So many people are printing out my story and they're going to give it to family members and close friends that they're going to try to repair their relationships, and they're going to try to use my piece to, like, hey, can you understand now? Will this help you understand? And that's something I could have never expected. It's kind of a heavy weight to bear, but if I can help people come to our side and get out of the cult, I'll do it.
Yeah. And I totally understand that too. And that honestly is one of the most humbling things for me about this whole journey is, I mean, it started obviously like after my article went viral, but it's honestly continued since February for me as I get emails and messages all the time from people all over the world saying, you know, that Trump derangement syndrome has destroyed my relationships. I want my friends back. I want my family back. This is destroying my marriage. How do I repair my marriage? And it's an incredibly humble experience to go through. And it's probably for me one of the reasons I kept speaking out about all of this, because I never wanted to do this. Like, this was not in my life plan at all. And I think that people who haven't been through something like this, like you have now, and I've been going through since February, I really don't think they realize how disruptive it is to your life and to I mean who you are as a person and how you see yourself. But I felt for me there was, you know, an obligation to speak out because I knew that my story inspired and helped so many people, and I wanted to keep giving that value to the world.
Yeah, and for me, I'm disabled, and I can't put my body on the street anymore, do things like that. So writing is my tool to leverage what I've seen, and I do think we are kind of in an exclusive club right now in that we have studied this, we have diagnosed it, we have lived through it, we're developing tools to resist it. I'm hoping we can build a movement that is based on love and tolerance and our greater ideals that are basic principles. I grew up with Martin Luther King. His message is just ingrained in me. And I brought up the Coreys previously. These two people are stunning examples of how you can do the highest level activism with no hate. We worked with groups, Jewish groups, Palestinian groups, joint groups, anyone who came to the table with a good heart. We didn't have any anti-Semitism. Like, that was, it was kind of socially enforced. Like, if you were to say something anti-Semitic or act anti-Semitic, like, you weren't welcome. And it was real, it wasn't like the enforcement like that we're seeing now. It just was a social norm that anti-Semitism isn't welcome here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I guess here, since we're there, I can date my first struggle session.
Oh,
there were no words for it at the time, but my first struggle session, group of them, was in 2010. While working with the Corey Foundation, we were working to do a huge mural in downtown Olympia. It's at the time, at least, it was the largest Palestinian solidarity mural in the world, I believe. And it was this huge wall, and we were on the production team, and there were some breaches of etiquette, and it blew up, microaggression type stuff. I don't bore with details, but it blew up into that we had to have public meetings with speaking and tears and the crimes were, there was a tokenization. Someone was asked to join the team because they were Latina, and we wanted to have a diverse crowd. And, granted, that's not the best way to recruit, but to struggle session over it. Another was cultural appropriation, that we were going to use images that white people weren't allowed to use. And so we had to have all these open public meetings where our accusers came in and chastised us. Our penance was to do anti-oppression training with Evergreen professors.
Oh God. Oh.
So
How was that?
we had to apologize. Well, back then, and this is the frog in the pot thing. It's incrementalism. Back then, they were reasonable principles. Okay, yeah, white people do have a bit of advantage. It seemed benign. It just seemed things that normal, nice people think and do that you really don't have to tell me not to slur people or. And that's what's so crazy now is, okay, all these people, like, did they not attend anti-oppression training?
No. No.
I'm just saying, like, what did I take a nap during that part where calling people chud is okay and trying to harm people with lasers and ball bearings is cool? Like, I missed it.
Well, it's completely okay if you're not on their team. Anything goes when you're not on their team. It doesn't matter. I mean, we had in one of the walkaway rallies we did in Dallas, the goddess Shamika Michelle was like shouting down Black Lives Matters protesters who were screaming at her for daring to speak at a rally. We've had, Brandon and Mikey Harlow have been chased down the street by BLM people and had homophobic slurs hurled at them. And so it's like, when I'm out there. And granted, I will admit that my experience is very specific because I am traveling with Walkaway, and so that is the direct experience that I have. I don't see racism and homophobia coming from the right. I see it coming from the left, directed at the people they disagree with on the right.
Yeah. And it's Tim Pool has brought this up a little bit. I mean, he's not the only one, but it's that incrementalism. That one person takes one tiny action, then another person riffs on that. And it's that sort of incrementalism that led to things like the Cultural Revolution and the Holocaust. Like the dehumanizing right now with the slurs and that, all conservatives, if you're a Trump voter, you're being dehumanized. And that dehumanizing then allows for poor treatment. Like it's okay to abuse you. It's okay to emotionally manipulate you. It's okay to say these things to you because you're a Trump voter. And so you go from the dehumanization to verbal abuse and emotional abuse, which is paving the way, as we're seeing in real time, to violence. And I get called out for concern trolling, but coming from the activist community, I actually have a lot of empathy for like the Antifa people in Portland. And why I say that is I have PTSD. I'm reading accounts. A lot of them are getting PTSD. They are psychologically self-harming with their activism. Mm-hmm. And they are paying a price. They're going to pay a price psychologically now with trauma. They're going to pay a price psychologically later when they come to regret their actions, say they become a parent, and hopefully they reflect, or their life events reflect on why they would hurt another human, by throwing a firework at them. And then furthermore, the legal troubles they're going to get in. A lot of them are just catch and release, and it's nothing. There's not going to affect them legally at all. But a certain select few, they are going to go down. They're going to go down for a long time, and their lives are ruined. Like Matt Doloff in Denver, who shot the conservative in Denver. That moment of anger just ruined his life. It ruined his family's life for what? And of course it ruined the victim and their family. For what? These are futile. The people important are fleas on the back of the machine. Mm-hmm. What they're doing, the only thing they're doing is driving votes to Trump. They're not going to affect police reform. They're going, if anything, they're going to have a negative effect on police reform because people are going to say, we have to have the police. If you wanted to eliminate the police, it's not the way to do it to make there be a need for more police.
Yeah.
like they're completely working counter to their cause.
Absolutely, and I think, one of the things that I've been spending an awful lot of time thinking about is what is the ramification of an entire generation of people addicted to outrage? Because I think this is a much bigger problem than the election. This is a much bigger problem than critical race theory. This is a much bigger problem than almost anything. What do we do when an entire generation of people are addicted to the feeling of outrage and are constantly feeding outrage into their system? And how is that going to manifest for their family relationships? How is that going to manifest for them being professionals in the work environment or even being able to exist in a work environment? How is that going to impact the economy? How can we transition these, I mean, I'm going to call them kids because I do perceive a lot of them to be kids.
Well,
How do we transition, like,
yeah, there's
how do we
old people,
detox them?
but
Oh,
yeah, but we're talking about the people that don't know differently.
yeah,
Sorry.
and there's going to be a way to detoxify everyone from this mentality, because, as you said, it's not just about, I feel for anyone going to jail over a crime that they committed when they got themselves so worked up into a fit of rage where they may not have even known what they were doing, but at the end of the day they still committed that crime. So, there are consequences to your actions. What I really feel though are kids who, they don't know anything different than this because their parents coddled this, their teachers coddled this. They've never been shown a different way. And they're going to lose years off their life from physically impacting their health because of the stress that this mentality is causing them.
Exactly, and that's the trauma thing. They do not know what trauma will do to you. Some people are going to be fine. Other people are going to get lifelong chronic illness like me, just for this summer of doing this. And I think you bring up a really key insight about the outrage, the psychological addiction to outrage. I was seeing the cycle in myself. I would get outrage, and that outrage would give me energy, which felt good. But then I would have to get depressed because that energy and the outrage was too overwhelming and anxiety producing. So it would then lead to depression, where then I'd need the anger, the energy of the outrage to come out of the depression. And it's a vicious cycle. And I mean, that was all, I didn't really talk a lot about the psychological reasons in my essay, my personal, medical, or psychological, but I touched on a little bit, but more third person, but it is absolutely soul destroying to be trained to find the problematic in everything and everyone. I was trained to look at anything or anyone and immediately say what was wrong with it and like what social problems was it causing. I could do 3 minutes on Coke. I used to drink Mexican Coke in the glass bottles, so that was way more problematic for many, many reasons. But it goes against every, I had done a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy to rewrite the scripts coming out of my abuse. I grew up in abuse. So I had done a lot of work with cognitive behavioral therapy, and this movement destroys all of those principles, catastrophizing, binary thinking. It's just not healthy psychologically to think that way. And so, I mean, we had the outrage, and then we have Trump derangement syndrome is probably a subcategory, subdiagnosis of outrage. And then the social justice righteousness is like another strain. And there is a strain on the right. I mean, we can't deny, and you talk about being dirty doing this. And you mentioned it earlier in your Prager video about people are accusing you of being used by the right. And I got that just this morning on Facebook before coming on. They're just using you. And I find that really insulting because it's telling us that we don't know what we're doing or that we haven't thought about this and that we will let ourselves be used. And I don't know about you, but right now, I feel so betrayed and used by the left that I am hyper aware that I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm being very careful to not join another cult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you do have to be careful too, because I'll tell you what, like there are absolutely people in this space that will 100% use you just for their own gain. And I'm not gonna be that guy. I'm not gonna name names. But that is absolutely true. But what I found, at least in the people that I've interacted with, that there have been so many like just really kind, open people that are more coming from a supportive environment. And this is one of the things that I never understood about the left, even when I had my old friends who were screaming at me to just shut up and listen to Black people. If I just shut up and listen, like everything was going to be okay. I never understood that mentality of telling people to shut up and to take a back seat. And this is something that the left doesn't understand. It's like we have to win this election by any means necessary, except we're not ever going to be nice to people on the right. And we're not ever going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And we're not ever going to say, maybe they have a point and maybe I should consider it and have a constructive dialogue. No, it's just resist, resist, resist.
Well, and the lack of willingness to honestly explore why they lost in 2016. Mm-hmm. And the lack of self-awareness and self-reflection is just remarkable. Like I say in my piece I thought the country had committed suicide. How could this be? I'm being told that 50% of the country's racist. And I just couldn't believe that. I know racism exists, and there are still, especially in the Pacific Northwest, is actually one of the hotbeds of actual white supremacy, which right now they must be loving it, because now, like, when everyone's white supremacists, nobody's really paying attention to them or what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Before, when white supremacy was limited to the neo-Nazis, we were able to pay more attention to it. And I will note, I realized this too, like we had that one little show of white supremacy in Charlottesville, but they were quickly marginalized, and I'm sure they're operating, but they have like close to zero cultural influence compared with the extremists on the left. Yeah. And here's something too, there is a symbiosis. Like the left and I think it's Douglas Murray who advances this a lot in Madness of Crowds, is that the left has run out of oppression, and so they're having to create new oppression. And that's absolutely true in Olympia. It's absolutely true with what happened at Evergreen. And that's what's happening. The dynamic with Antifa in Portland is they are creating enemies so they have someone to fight. By attacking law enforcement, by attacking the right in the way they do, they are creating a reactionary movement. Even when they're like just the Trump trainers driving down the highway, that probably wouldn't happen without Antifa. Mm-hmm. So they are creating the circumstances, but that is part of the goal. And this is like my biggest advice to the right coming from the left, is just let their crazy do the heavy lifting. Do not engage with them. Do the creative protests where you're on the highway, where they can't engage with you and show your anger for propaganda. And if you are engaging with them, my biggest advice is just continue to remain decent. You will not regret it. There will not be ugly films of you. And, just if you are in a trolly mood, it enrages them. They don't know what to do when faced with your decency. So if you can just stand there, like Nick Sandman, and smile and keep cool, just keep cool. Right now, if you are not working to de-escalate the situation, if you are in any way working to escalate the situation right now, you really should think seriously about what you're doing, because it's very volatile. It's volatile.
You know, I agree with that to a certain extent. I also definitely do have a trolley side of me that I will absolutely 100% admit to. I like to think my trolling is in good fun and is not actually meant to escalate things, but I could be wrong about that. But I will say this, I do think that the right needs to start pushing back more. And one of the things that I've really been working on the last several months is helping people to find their voice and to say what they think and to do exactly what you did, which is not to be afraid to say, here is what I think, and here is why I think it. And that's almost some of the most offensive things that we can do to piss them off. But I want to go to this quick super chat for a second because it came in a while ago. I want to make sure I acknowledge it from Lady Hawk. Lady Hawk says, also an atheist, but Americans do have freedom to worship as they please. The NPCs are scared of us who are still capable of independent thought. And the reason I wanted to go to that one is, in our discussion, I was thinking about what I did right after the 2016 election, which, I like you, I was devastated after the 2016 election. I cried. I had definitely a moment. But right after it, I mean, it was like a week or two after it, just by pure coincidence, I went to Peru. And I went to Peru on a spiritual retreat for like 10 days and did all sorts of plant medicine up in the mountaintops in Peru and, really worked on releasing my anger and releasing my resentment, not just about the election, but about like just pretty much everything, like family relationships and stuff like that. And I actually, I'm not a Christian. I think everyone should be able to practice their own religion. I'm obviously not an atheist either, but I fully support your right to believe or not believe whatever you want. But I really credit that spiritual journey for me as something that probably saved me from becoming just like the extremists on the left, because it was all focused on what can I do? What can I put out there? Learning how to love myself, regardless of what anyone else says or thinks. And I think that one of the things I really see lacking on the left, in particular, I see lacking on the right too, but really lacking on the left among the people who are protesting and rioting, is they don't have a sense of internal security and they don't have internalized self-worth. And because they don't have that, they're putting all of this anger and all of this angst and all of this frustration out into the world.
Yes, yes, and and they're feeling personal power. It's fun, it's exciting, and it feels powerful, but it's not a foundation of power. It's not, it's an illusory, transitory sense of power. That's not going to. It's not the kind of power where invested in yourself to become stronger or build a better foundation. And I think what's really important, the only thing we can control right now is our own conduct. Mm-hmm. And, we have to, my catchphrase is decency for the win. We have to be the decent ones. We have to walk the talk and be more than ever in the world, kind, generous, open, independent. And we have to be role models. Like, if you have a chance to role model these qualities, you have to step up. And my other cure, I think, is really important, is the people like us who are nurturing these qualities and who are walking the talk and who want to unite. We have to run for office. We have to get people like us in office ASAP. The rapidity of the mainstreaming of critical race theory makes this imperative. So if you are decent, and you're on the fence, run for the smallest office you can. School board, PTA, anything where you will be in a position to set a boundary around these types of, racist content. I think that's the most anti-racist thing you could do.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. So I want to just go back, Candy, to the moment that you knew that you had to vote for Donald Trump. Because I think for me, coming to that realization that, oh my God, I'm going to be a Trump supporter, it was the most, I mean, I don't want to swear, but mind F thing that's ever happened to me in my life. What was that experience like for you?
It was a process. It was slow, it was slow. And it really had to be the critical race theory ban when he signed that order. That was when it tipped it for me. And still, I think the vote for Trump is not necessarily an endorsement of Trump. While we've seen that he has done very good policy things, he has also done bad policy things. But I think right now it's so important to have a pushback and a resistance to the left. I am way more afraid of the left than I am of the right. And so that, and some of the shaming I'm getting is from people who don't know what it's like to go through what we've been through. They really don't know, and they have no courage. And one thing I do is I'll admit I bait them a little bit. I'm like, okay, you say you're not in a cult. You pick a couple issues that you disagree with the crowd on. There has to be a couple where you're like, I'm not down with this. Post about it. Go ahead. I dare you. Post about it. Then post another one. Just see what happens, and then come talk to me. What happened? I'm a very resilient person. I've been through a lot in my life that's much worse than this. What happened to me could cause people to consider suicide. I could see it. If you didn't have a strong enough sense of self, a strong enough sense of perspective, and just a sense of being right. And here's an area I think we have to be careful on. In our moralizing toward decency and goodness, we have to be careful in our piety that we don't also become scolds. And so the way I approach it too is just, again, leading by example, not telling people to do this, like, you be decent, be nice, but just embodying it myself and hoping that attracts others. And so many times when they've told me about people that hate, like Dennis Prager, like your Prager experience, Dennis Prager's a devil. He's horrible. Like for years I've heard, like, he's a Zionist, he's this, he's that. And then I finally tune in and he's like, God, he's
reasonable. He's so reasonable.
He's so reasonable. I don't agree with him on everything, but I understand he has thought about it, and he's not doing anything out of hate or he's doing it because that's his personal conclusions. So every one of them, Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein, I was asked to join the Bat Gang at Evergreen. That's how deep I was in. I did not join the Bat Gang. I am not physically able to join a Bat Gang, but I was told about, the racist professor and just all the horrible things about him. And then I finally did see him speak. Which side am I going to be attracted to?
Have you watched Benjamin Boyce's complete series on what happened at Evergreen?
Oh, of course. Oh,
it's unbelievable. And I would strongly encourage anyone in the chat who is not yet, like, you may have seen like news reports about Evergreen or see like the Mike Namath documentary about Evergreen. Watch Benjamin Boyce's full complete series because it is mind-bogglingly. He has so much more information that's what has been released anywhere else.
Yeah, and see this my great thesis is a couple things, like tolerance for harm and boundaries. So Jordan Peterson asks, he says the left or the right is virulent nationalism is when the right has gone too far. I propose when the left has gone too far, it is tolerance for harm. When people become so tolerant to behavior and accepting of any behavior, even antisocial behavior, that allows harm, that's what I'm seeing happening in especially homelessness, that they've been so accepting of the homeless lifestyle that we have people living in camps and dying in camps because nobody wants to be the bad guy. Nobody wants to set boundaries. And if you're a parent, you know that boundaries are compassionate. Boundaries Boundaries are good for everyone. People want boundaries, and it's human nature to push and push and push until you hit a wall. And there simply has been no stop on the left. There's been nobody setting boundaries on the left in any way. There's been a couple tepid attempts, but nobody's saying, no, I reject this. No, I don't want people shooting up on the streets of Olympia. No, I don't want people living in camps.
Well, and actually, when Scott Pressler went to do a trash cleanup in San Francisco, he joined up with Walkaway to do this. I don't know if you've seen this footage. You should go back and watch it if you haven't. But he was actually, Antifa protested a trash cleanup because they said that he was attacking homeless people. And one of them actually punched Lady Maga, who's a drag queen. And it was the most ridiculous thing that I've ever seen in my life. I want to take this super chat from Quantum Football. They say, I think the biggest problem is that being an activist on the left gets you paid, while activists on the rest of the spectrum is mostly volunteer. And I think that's such an interesting point because, Candy, if this hasn't happened to you already, let me just warn you. You are about to have everyone everywhere screaming that the only reason you're doing this is because you got paid. After I did my PragerU video, they were like, oh, enjoy that sweet, sweet PragerU cash, you grifter. When I don't get paid for any of this stuff that I do, like, and not even the walkaway rallies or any of that really. And, you know, I remember when PragerU first asked me to do the video, it just by pure coincidence, two of my old lefty friends on Facebook that day, they didn't know I was doing a PragerU video. They posted about how awful PragerU was and how they're these awful propagandists and all that. And I was like, I had an amazing experience with PragerU. I had complete script approval. They made sure I was completely comfortable with what I was doing. All of the people there were so nice and professional. I have nothing but good things to say about them. And it's just like the amount of excuses that the left comes up with for people like us about why we do what we do, rather than engaging with our ideas, rather than reading your article and saying, Candy, you got some good points here. It's just like they just have to explain everything away.
Well, and I think when it comes to the grift accusation, it's another case of projection, man.
Isn't it true?
I earned $7.88 from my Medium article so far.
Yeah, congratulations.
I did get one donation to my rent GoFundMe. But I actually try to be very low key about raising funds. I do need support to do the work I'm doing because I'm extremely low income. I'm on disability. My rent is higher than my income. So everything I do, the hours I put in is completely pro bono and actually working against my self-interest. You know, I should be trying to sell stuff on eBay or something, but I have to, being disabled, I have to have something that has meaning in my life. And doing this work is the meaning, that helps me cope with my disability. I think the left, going back to the projection a little bit, is the left is totally figuring this out. We had a woman in Olympia, and I'm not saying she did it to make money. I think she did it for political reasons, but she falsely accused a cop of saying something they didn't say when they were arresting her for, her vandalism. And she got a $6,500 payday off of it.
Wow.
And I see blatant attempts of people directly asking for reparations. Like the worst case, the nerve. The worst case was in the comedy world. Two comics lived together, two black comics. The male comic was on Facebook shilling for white people to give him rent money for his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yo, white people.
Well, do you know that there is a whole group on Facebook of It's completely dedicated to Black people who are asking white people for money. And our little white saviors and allies go and join this group specifically so they have the opportunity to give money to Black people who need it for whatever thing they might need it for. They want to get their nails done, they want to go shopping, they want to pay rent. It is the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life. I think it's like a sexual thing that they get off on, being like the sugar daddies, but it's really bizarre.
Well, it's the guilt, the white guilt in the Pacific Northwest. People are so guilty in general here, and that's like why the homeless situation too is people are like, they just feel guilt. And people are very generous here as a whole. And I don't want to say they just are generous out of guilt. But there is a lot of pathological altruism. There's a lot of savior complex. There's a lot of, like, the Black population is very small here. So for many people, especially if you've grown up here and you've never lived anywhere else, Black people are kind of like an abstraction to you. So they don't really haven't had relationships with Black people. They only have the media or what they're being told. And so that creates, here's a story. I had a friend who had moved up here from Atlanta with a teenage son. They're Black. And this stuck with me. I'll never forget it. He was just so alienated from the white kids here. And he said to his mom, he's like, why won't they just act normal? They treated him like he was this fragile, special object, and he just wanted to be one of them, but right. They were careful around him, and it was so sad.
That's the most bizarre thing of all to me is like any minority that I've ever met, they just want to be treated like everyone else. They don't want to be treated special. They don't want to be treated like kid gloves. And especially like of all the people who don't need white saviors to help them, it's Black women. Like they do not need you.
And that's like a gross underbelly of all this, like Robin DiAngelo and everything, is how they infantilize Black people and think that they're weak. Black people are some of the strongest people I've known. Like I grew up in Buffalo. I saw Black strength. I saw Black power. And so it's very weird for white people to be treating Black, and that's what I think when reading White Fragility and everything, it does come out very clear that Robin DiAngelo thinks she's better than Black people.
Yes, she does.
She just, I don't know why, but she does. And I,
go ahead.
If the people that don't, that White Fragility doesn't resonate with, like you and I, we don't think we're better than Black people.
No.
So, like,
I think that's a really astute point, and I think that one of the reasons she thinks she's better than Black people is for exactly the reason that you mentioned, and this is my perception of Robin DiAngelo. I could be wrong. I'm going based on what she wrote in her own book, but it seemed as though she had a very sheltered experience where she didn't really have much, many Black friends. She didn't know many Black people, and so this is her perception as a sheltered white lady who sees herself as the white savior and who is working through her own feelings of white guilt, and I think it's sad. I think it is sad to go through your entire life, thinking that you're better than other people because no one is inherently better than anyone else, but also to see yourself as someone who has to come and save people. Like, they don't need you. I mean, I suppose, like, I feel like people like you and I, we have so much more faith in the average human being, white, Black, brown, gay, straight, trans, otherwise. Like, we have so much more faith in people to empower themselves that they don't need our help. If they ask for our help, I'm happy to give it, but they don't need us.
Yes. Well, here's a point to that regarding the homeless issue. There is a subculture, a subset of homeless. There are a lot of different subtypes of homeless, but the one I'm talking about, there is a subculture of street people who want the freedom. They like the freedom. This is their values. They are choosing this life. And I've interviewed some of them, and they are by no means victims. They don't see themselves as victims. They see themselves as in control of what they're doing. They will play the victim card sometimes. I have seen how they have like little scripts in interviewing that were played on me that were like, okay, I can see what I'm seeing, but the script you're telling me. But again, projection. Are you just projecting your feeling of victimhood onto everyone else? And one thing, here's something we need to be careful of, and I'm thinking of, and I want to make sure and check myself on this, is I do not, and I hope my article is a part of fighting this, is I do not want to become a persecuted right wing, and just live in that persecuted state of, oh, they hate me and they're so wrong. And I don't think I'm there. I don't think I'm stuck there. I don't think you are there either. But I think it's something to watch out for, that I don't want that to become my identity, the persecuted outcast. I am more than the persecuted outcast. And I'm part of my thing with the article was to sort of liberate from that and to say specifically that I am not a victim. I own this. This is my choice. You're not going to bully me. And oh, there's so much to talk about. Niceness. People in the Pacific Northwest are so nice, and their niceness gets weaponized against them. Mm-hmm. And that's when you talk about, speaking out, going back to your earlier point, it's not just conservatives that have to speak out. Everyone who is feeling self-censored, everyone who's being canceled, they need the tools to do it. And to those people, I say it's very hard at the beginning. It's very hard. But for me, living true to myself is way more important than the fallout. And God, I don't want to have any regrets over my conduct. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be victimized. I don't want to continue to be abused and told I'm on the wrong path. And I don't want people in my life that call me Nazis or think I defend Nazis. So where I'm going with this is I had to learn, what are your boundaries? What behavior will you tolerate? And I was strongly in the no cancel camp, that I'm not going to cancel people. Mm-hmm. And my niceness, I should have set a boundary a little sooner. And the difference is, I think there's a difference between discussing ideas and being put on trial for your morality. Yes. I will discuss ideas all day, but if you are going to tell me I'm a bad person, if you're going to shame me, if you're going to argue with me using emotional manipulation, guilt, shame, things like that, and I'm on trial, that's the boundary where I'm not going to have you on my page anymore. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to figure that one out.
Yeah, I definitely use the block button very, very, very liberally these days. Mostly people I don't know. I don't tend to block people that I actually know in real life or have had a relationship with at some point in my life. But I mean, there are just so many trolls out there that, and I'm sure you've already experienced some of it, that it's just, it is beyond any point that I am acceptable with it. And there's nothing that I can ever, they don't want a reasonable conversation. They're not acting in good faith. There's nothing that I can ever say that's going to help them see me as a human being, because they have very literally made the choice not to see me as a human being. And I think that goes back to what you said, is like at the beginning of our chat, which is all of a sudden these people that you've known for ever, they see you as a completely different person. It's almost like you are not you to them anymore. Now you are an evil Trump supporter. And it's just like, life is too short for these things so far as I'm concerned. And I think that one of the things that we, like people like us, can do to not become these victims and not to live out in this victim mentality all the time as like the ostracized person from the left, is to put your foot down and say, no, you're not allowed in my experience. And I completely welcome anyone of all different points of view that want to be reasonable adults. But if you're going to come in and try to harass me or do any of these things, I'm going to block you so fast it's going to make your head spin, and I'm just not going to deal with it. I do want to get to a couple super chats, and then I have a couple more questions. Candy David says the problem is, of course, at some point liberalism has been taken over by the left. They are absolutists. There is room for progressives, but the left is another thing altogether. I mean, liberalism at this point, like from my perspective, I think that Donald Trump, in words I never thought I would say, Donald Trump is truly the more liberal choice among the two candidates we have for president. He's both the more liberal choice and the more conservative choice. I don't know how that worked out.
Well, I mean, he is a New York liberal. I mean, he joined the Republican Party as a matter of convenience, which was one of the confusing things to me about how the Republicans embraced him so well. It wasn't until I got, how much they, I didn't understand the deplorables remark. When that came out, I'm like, well, whatever. But now I do. Now I understand why that was so insulting, and like how misaligned the conservatives are by the left. They're not seeing reality, not only with Trump but with their conservative neighbors. And I mean, that was a real reckoning to me. That was my last bigotry. I had a real bigotry. I'm not going to say it was hate in my heart, but it was definitely distrust, dismissal, closed off. Like, so it's such a surprise to find them having changed and being so refreshing. And some are saying, oh, well, it's just because, you're running into their arms because the other side hates you and they're just being nice to you. I don't know. They just, it seems more genuine than that. And maybe I'm being fooled. If they start abusing me too, I'm not going to stick around.
I totally I agree with you that I think it is more genuine. I hear this all the time too, especially from the bread tube kids, is like, you're only doing this because the right was nice to you. Well, human beings make decisions on an emotional basis. So yes, I am actually probably going to gravitate more towards the people who are nice to me than the people who are calling me a Nazi every single day. That is 100% true, but it's not the beginning and the end of the story. There's also, I think that one of the things you said is that the Republicans embrace Trump. A lot of the Republicans, like the traditional Republicans, the neocons, they don't like Trump at all. Like, I think a lot of people, especially in 2016, were really pissed that Trump won the nomination. And I think one of the things that I've recently decided to become a Republican, for like words I still feel like a little icky even saying those words. But I think one of the reasons that I made that choice is because I think that Trump has fundamentally transformed the Republican Party to make it a more open, accepting party. And I want to see that change solidified. Whether or not Trump wins the election or not, I think that the evolution of the Republican Party to become more of a big tent and more accepting of all different types of people is a really, really good thing. And I would hate to see it go back to where it was like under W or in the 90s or things like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go back because there are going to be so many refugees like this, and I hope the conservatives don't feel like that we're trying to take over their party. But I think the feeling I've got is they're welcoming the addition, but they're with me. I mean, in terms of like gay rights and everything, it's just, there's no question. Everyone is down with it. There's the abortion issue. There's definitely pro-life versus pro-choice. I don't think I will ever go to the pro-life side, but I have a new appreciation for why they had that stance.
Yeah.
I can appreciate their decision.
I agree with you on that. Like, I'm still pro-choice myself, but I'm pro-choice with limits. And what I have found, like, my limit is like 3 months, except if the life of the mother is in danger, which You know, we can get into conversations about what about 3 months and 1 day, Carlin, why aren't you okay with that? I'm not going to have that discussion. There has to be a limit somewhere. And what I've actually found on the right is that most people who are reasonable about this issue, they say, Carlin, we can live with that. But they really have an issue with what's going on now in terms of abortion up until the moment of birth. And I agree with that. I like watching some of these rallies, and like I've never even thought about being pro-choice in my life, but watching some of the rallies that were occurring before the pandemic where women were celebrating their abortions, where they were talking about, I've had 6 abortions and I'm just going to keep going, and they're using it as a form of birth control, that to me just seems resoundingly unhealthy on so many levels.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the only time I have seen zealotry close to what I'm seeing right now, and I touch on this in my article, is the Spring of Life in Buffalo. This was in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm not sure the exact date, but a group of pro-life activists, and these are the hardcore ones. They came in from Wichita, and they basically put our city under siege. A bunch of people came in from Canada as well. And these were the types of people and the groups for which the clinic protection laws came into effect, that you had to stay 25 feet from the entrance of a clinic. I escorted, when I had my abortion, I had to walk through the lines of protesters. I escorted other women through those protesters. It was ugly. And that is, when I talk about incrementalism, those protests led to the assassination of abortion providers.
Wow.
One in Buffalo was shot. He shot by a sniper rifle. He was sitting at his dining room table in Amherst, New York, shot dead. So that's the incrementalism. I've seen zealotry. I've seen what the end point of it is. And even the French Revolution and Robespierre and the Reign of Terror, that didn't end very well for Robespierre. He got the guillotine as well. So, I don't know why they're not seeing this. And yeah, granted, Antifa is the fringe element of the left, but in the Pacific Northwest, they are tacitly supported. No one speaks against them. People are giving them the bail money and the money. Talk about grift, having to raise money for your shields and your helmets and your gas masks. Come on.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid.
I
want to.
Yeah.
And the people that are donating to this, it's like, don't you look at what you're supporting? But of course they don't, because I mean, this is part of the derangement, right? I think that they literally cannot see what they're supporting. This whole idea that Antifa is just an idea. Well, no, I mean, my friend Elijah Schaefer last night got punched in the face and has like a whole cut up lip because he went and covered the looting in Philadelphia. And so, no, Antifa is not just an idea. Ideas can't punch you in the face.
Yeah. And they're using residents as human shields, and then it's pointless. And they're not doing it. I mean, it's not even going to get them anywhere. It's absolutely pointless.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Nothing good.
Lady Hawk says toxic altruism nailed it, Candy. I agree with her on that one specifically. Let's see. We got a couple other super chats. I just want to make sure we get to you. And then I want to talk to you about board games, Sandy, because people have been commenting. They're like, Candy's got a whole bunch of board games. And we're going to talk about social justice in that context. Tip for Tool says, great article, Candy. It is obvious you have invested well in your self-education. You choose to seek truth rather than maintain comfort. What books helped you prepare for this paradigm change? What a great question.
I will cite 3 top of my head. Strangers in Their Own Land, which a journalist goes into conservative country to find out why they vote against their interests. Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, which told me that the world is not as bad as the left has told me. By so many metrics, the world is much better than the left has told me. And finally, the one that really blew my mind, that cracked the whole thing open for me, Jonathan Haidt and The Righteous Mind, and Moral Foundations Theory, and laying out in a very clear way the difference between liberals and conservatives, and that they aren't bad, they're just different, and that we need the tension between all these values to come out with a better product. So I cannot recommend, like, if we're talking about antidotes to breaking this, at least for intelligent people willing to read and look, The Righteous Mind and Moral Foundations Theory is a great place to start. Like, buy that book for your relatives for Christmas.
I agree with that one. That is an excellent book. I feel like I need to listen. I listen to audiobooks because I knit. And I feel like I need to listen to that one again because I don't think I got all of the salient details the first time through. Because there's so much in it. It's just such a I feel like it's one of those books you could read over and over again and still pick out new details every single time.
I would like to go back to it as well.
Zaza Zoom says, great job, both of you. Running for office is a must for conservatives. Welcome Carlin 2022 or run Carlin 2022. We'll see, guys. We'll see. I haven't made the final call on that. It's going to depend on a lot of factors. Kelly, I just want to thank you for the super chat and for the support. And Candy, let's talk about the board games, because one of the things I found interesting is a lot of people know that like what started me on this journey was that social justice came in and took over my knitting community, and I get made fun of all the time for being the girl that I just wanted to knit. That was all I wanted. But you were telling me before we came on air that social justice has taken over the board game community as well. What's going on there?
Well, yeah, I mean, Gamergate, everyone's kind of familiar with Gamergate and video games, and that was a whole other thing. What I'm talking about is more recent and current and more happening around Board Game Geek, which is a site where we all hang out on, and we are an interesting subculture. It's a subculture that kind of self-selects male. It self-selects for a certain personality type, which is kind of Aspergian. Board gamers, we are a tribe kind of bonded by our intellectual curiosity, our desire to sort components and play with toys, and they're intellectual puzzles. So it's a self-selecting group. There's been a big concern about diversity, inclusion, and equity in the board gaming world. How do we make it more diverse? How do we attract more people? For the record, I've been in the hobby a decade. It's been cis white men who have always supported me, who brought me into the hobby, who were patient with me, teaching me games, who supported me economically by lending me games, selling me their games cheap, giving me their games. Cis white men, great. Right now, ironically, those same cis white men have now shunned me. I lost my main gaming buddy over politics. One of the things, we never bring politics to the gaming table. It's usually a politics-free zone. We just don't even talk about it. But again, this was Facebook. So my 7-year-old buddy that I've been playing with for 7 years broke up with me. I am not totally shunned. The community spaces that I go to, I'm sure I'll be welcome once COVID stops, but it's going to be a little awkward with these other guys around. But going to Board Game Geek, this push for representation is having some really ugly outcomes. And it is breeding a lot of resentment, because most geeks are very inclusive and they don't care. But we have people now forcing others to do their art in a certain way. We have a board game publisher, I think his name's Robert Bruce. He was dropped, board game designer rather. He was dropped from his publisher by Twitter, over Twitter. They didn't even email him or call him. They broke up with him on Twitter. His crime was saying some things that are similar to what we say. I can't remember specifically. On his personal page, that got him canceled from his publisher. Right now, I don't want to name the game because I don't want to hurt them anymore. A game takes a tremendous effort to get to published. A designer spends years on it, a team of artists, writers, publishers to get the components. You put a lot of work into getting a game to market. And right now there's a specific game that somebody has started a campaign against because it doesn't have any characters of color in it. I don't even want to describe the setting of the game. but because there's no pictures of Black people on the pieces of cardboard, this woman is calling out the game. She's like, I'm not going to buy it. So all these other people are chiming in, well, I'm not going to buy it either. She goes even further and she calls out the reviewers who reviewed this game for not talking about that it doesn't have Black people on the cards. And now when there's a big long thread that's like 30 pages long on The Geek. There are whole pages of content where the content has been removed. It's been modded off the page for being dismissive/disruptive. A few of those comments are mine. I tried to give an opposing viewpoint, and I was shut off and threatened with suspension. My opposing viewpoint was simply that, like, I wanted some understanding why this matters so much. Like, my self-worth is not linked to seeing myself on a card. And maybe this is sort of my Aspergianness. Like, I get representation in the big picture. It's not like I'm blind to representation. Like, when I saw Lena Dunham get naked on Girls, a girl with my body type, I gotta say, I was like, all right, cool.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that. Yeah, totally.
But to force another artist to change their art to bend to my ego, and then take somebody's life work project and destroy its chances, or try to destroy its chances, and then to have the administrators on Board Game Geek censoring everyone else in their efforts to be inclusive and tolerant. And predictably, there is a lot of resistance on The Geek, from guys who are like, I'm not racist, and I think part of the problem is the hobby does self-select. There are ways we could bring other people into the hobby, but I have never, as an elderly, old middle-aged white woman walking into the gaming group of all generally younger men, never have I've always felt welcome. They've gone out of their way to include me and help me understand it. They want people to play with. They're desperate for people to play with. And, here's an interesting thing about self-selection is this is one of the saddest things. This is a trope, is men who, marry wives who aren't interested in board games, mm-hmm. and won't play board games with them. And it happens so much that like, okay, I don't think the hobby's ever going to be 50% sex-wise, because I think it's like kind of that systemizing thinking that is more male-dominant that draws people to the hobby. Yeah, so the least included I have ever felt in gaming has been in the past year, mm-hmm. in the name of tolerance.
Well, I'll tell you, I know I remember the feeling well of when I first came out, I suppose, as not buying into this. Excuse me, hang on. I don't have COVID. I swear I don't have COVID. I'm finally getting over the cold I've had for the week and a half. But I remember well the first time that I really started losing people and what that was like at first. And it sucks. I'm not going to lie. Like, when I lost friends that I've known for a decade, that I've literally spent time at their grandmother's house, that knew me, that were the people I had, the people I always called. And all of a sudden they thought I was this horrible, evil person and wanted nothing to do with me anymore. That sucked. But what I will say is, and I'm saying this not only to you, Candy, but to anyone out there that's listening, that's thinking about speaking up and coming out of the closet themselves, like, it gets better. It really does. And especially, you're wearing your walkaway hat. I've got my walkaway t-shirt on. Like, especially, like, you got to get in with like the walkaway community, get in their Facebook group, get in your local walkaway Facebook group, because those are two different things. You can meet up with people locally. And what I love about the walkaway community is, like, it's just the most open, accepting, welcoming community. It doesn't matter what you look like or who you love or anything like that. You are going to find friends in the walkaway community that will support you. And to me, they've been an absolute godsend. And so it gets better. I'm sure you're going to find many people that want to game with you again. Elizabeth, who is an amazing artist herself, said censoring artists is dangerous to culture. We need a cultural renaissance. I take the attacks on art as offensive. I tend to agree. I mean, I think, and I can think of very, very limited exceptions to this rule, but art should provoke people. Art should sometimes be offensive. Sometimes that is the absolute purpose of art, is to be offensive and to provoke that feeling in people. And that's a very necessary part of us being able to, I think, fully self-actualize as human beings. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of the danger is gone from art, like comedy. You can't have the freedom to provoke anymore because, well, you can provoke in a certain way, like if you Kathy Griffin and that's acceptable provocation. But I in music, a lot of the danger is gone. I grew up where art was danger, and that was part of the attraction of it being the counterculture. I do want to speak to your point. You are going to pay a price for speaking out. You have to be prepared for it. Other people will reach out to you, though, and you will rebuild. And you're going to rebuild with people who respect you for you, who aren't false friends. As for your relatives, that's particularly difficult. And you just have to, I think, keep trying and keep the communication channels open. And again, be decent, be ready, be graceful. And it brings me to an important point, that I've thought about is how, like, if people come back to me with apologies or want to come back into my life, how will I handle that? And I'm not certain. I think it's going to be on a case by case basis, by how they handled it before, how abusive they might have been, or how, not abusive, but just left. I'd like to think I'm going to have grace, but there are certain people who said things that would be very hard for me to have grace around because they did hurt. And if that's what you think about me, did you stop thinking that about me suddenly? Or, why are you coming back? Is it, why? What? I don't, so that's going to be, it hasn't really happened yet.
Yeah. It might, and I've thought a lot about this as well. I've had people here and there reaching out to me, especially after the riots started. I had people reaching out to me, kind of subtly probing and trying to see if I was going to be mean to them, if they tried to come back into my life. But I will say this: I generally think that. I mean, and I've been in this a little longer than you have, so maybe, and this was certainly a process for me. I think I probably would welcome them back at this point. Not without caution, not without keeping them at a safe distance. But the reason I say that is because Trump derangement syndrome is real. You write about in your article how you had Trump derangement syndrome. I absolutely had Trump derangement syndrome for several years. It is a real thing. It really does. And it didn't start with Trump, by the way. That's just the clever name that we've given it. But derangement itself started way before Trump. And essentially it's just like they're not seeing reality accurately. And they're reacting to their perception of it. And if they start to come out of it, if they start to wake up, I want to be there to help them through it because I've been down that path. I understand how jarring it is to every part of your experience where suddenly one day everything you know is wrong and you have to kind of go back and relearn, and so I would want to be there to help them. I would want to be there to support them. Again, not without some caution, because if they've said really evil things to me, that's going to be a line that they will not cross again. But I want to create space for people to change, and because people can't change, they can't come out of this if there's nowhere for them to go. And so I think that it's really important that we do create that environment as much as possible, even though it's really difficult at times given some of the things that some of these people have said and done.
I agree totally. Because I was in that mind space myself. I understand it. I get it, and I do try to look at people who, with that grace in mind, that, I was that person. They, they're just at a different point in their journey. And I think it's true. I think if like they were coming back and saying, hey, I'm going through this too, and coming, for support, I think definitely we need, one of the problems with the left right now is there's no path to redemption. You're gone, you're gone. There's no, I mean, there's the false apology, the forced apology, but the forced apology doesn't bring you back. It just gets you scorned. And they push your boundaries more because they know now you'll grovel. So again, it comes down to your personal conduct and being your best self, and showing leadership in how you treat people. Just such simple things that, God, why are we learning these things over in 2020? Why are we learning the golden rule?
Well, hindsight is 2020, isn't it, Candy? Hindsight is 2020. Well, let me just take these last couple. Go ahead.
That was a good way to wrap it up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me just take these last couple super chats and we'll wrap it up. I know we wanted to go about 90 minutes at maximum. So JAFO says, as an artist, I understand your sentiments. However, artists need to understand being an artist, even a great one, is like being a great lacrosse player. Who the hell gives an S? This will toughen them. I mean, I agree. I think that if you're and that's not just true of art. I think that if you're putting anything out into the world, whether it be an article or a painting or a board game or knitting something or tweeting something or doing whatever, you kind of have to like just not give an F what comes of it. You have to be comfortable with what you've put out into the world. And I think that that's the most important thing. And other people are going to react how they react. Robin says, making art as I listen. Robin looks like she has cool hair. Every single piece imbued with free thinking. Loving this interview, Candy and Carlin. Thank you, Robin, for your support. Let's see.
Robin, I got Robin. Robin's my best friend. Robin is who I dedicated, one of the two people I dedicated the piece to.
Oh, well, we love Robin then too. Welcome, Robin. Hank Reardon says, we are becoming unsilent and we stand with you both and all others who are willing to stand for their principles without hate. I love Hank. Hank is a good walk away. He's been to the last couple walk away rallies. And then Truman taking up the rear, return to reason with our last super chat. The left created dystopian thought policing reality where it requires courage to support the sitting president. People like you, Candy, James Lindsay, etc., making it easier for others to find their courage. And I think maybe that is the very best way to speak up because, and I'll just reiterate, like one of the reasons that I keep doing this stuff is because I think that one of the things that I'm trying to do is just provide an example of someone who's speaking up and won't take any grief or guff from anyone. And I think by doing that, even though it isn't always the easiest path to take, believe me, it presents an example for other people to follow. And I think that, that can be inspiring to a great many people to help them find their own voice. And I think that's really important. Candy, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to leave us with as we end today?
Well, yeah, I agree. We must provide templates for principled resistance. One of the persons that had a really great effect on me at the start of my journey was a woman named Frances Lee, who wrote a piece, something Why I Left the Church of Social Justice. And just finding that piece, just finding one other human who saw what I was sawing, saw what I was seeing, meant so much to me. So yeah, I think that's my goal too, is just to provide a template of resistance, like in giving permission to to people to think these thoughts, and telling people they're not bad people for thinking them. You're not alone. I have been inundated with messages. I will never feel alone again. We are the trendsetters right now. We are the new political movement in the United States. I believe that strongly. And because we have such good ideas and are such good people, we're going to draw people to us. And I have hope we're going to create something really big here.
I hope so too. Well, Candy, I want to thank you again for joining me today. The feedback in the chat has been overwhelmingly positive. So you've definitely inspired a lot of people here today with your courage and your bravery. And this was just a great chat. I enjoyed every single minute of it. And definitely let's check back in. See how you're doing as things progress. Believe me. It's a trip when you wake up and you learn more things every single day. So I would love to check in with you again sometime and just see how it's going. Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone, for coming. Oh, go ahead.
I've got some stories I can tell you about Evergreen and things like that. Like I've
Oh,
I've got stories.
well, we'll definitely have to do that. Maybe we'll get Benjamin Boyce on here. We can have a meeting of the minds about Evergreen.
The three of us together. Yes, let's do that after the election. When things calm down, the three of us could talk Evergreen and Olympia.
that
Um,
That sounds like a plan. I'm sure he'd be down for that. Absolutely. Um, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming out. Just a quick order of housekeeping. So, a couple of things coming up tomorrow in my locals community. If you have not already joined my locals, the information is in the description below. Every Thursday, we do a live Zoom call with all my local supporters. So it's a little way for us to have kind of like community time. It's awesome. People of all different points of view and perceptions, and we come together and commiserate about all the things that are wrong with the world. And it's just a really welcoming community. All diverse, all points of view are absolutely welcome. So our next live chat is going to be at noon tomorrow. Make sure you join into locals and become a supporter if you want to participate in that. We do them every week. Also tomorrow, I am going to be on Adam Krigler's show in the evening. His show is on 6:30, Adamcast IRL. And as some of you who are following on my Twitter may know today, I had some things to say about Tim having Vosh on his show last night. And I think Adam and I are going to be addressing those things. So it's going to be a particularly spicy episode that you probably don't want to miss because I have completely run out of F's when it comes to this entire situation. Candy obviously knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check my Twitter. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming out. Oh, one more thing. If any of you are in the Pittsburgh area or the Atlanta area, I'm actually coming your way this weekend. So Walkaway has 2 rallies this weekend. On Friday, I am flying to Pittsburgh for a rally on Saturday. And then immediately after the Pittsburgh rally on Saturday, we're all caravanning out to the airport and flying right down to Atlanta for another rally on Sunday. So if you are in either of those areas, you want to come out. I know me and Mikey are going to be there. Brandon's obviously going to be there. I don't think Shamika's going to be there for this one because she has some family things to do, but Brandon always gets also so many other great speakers. So definitely come out to the rally, Philadelphia and Atlanta. Info on walkawaycampaign.com. And yeah, guys, that's all I got for right now. Thank you for hanging out.
Thank you, Carlin.